Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining Darien Library this Monday evening for how to make the perfect holiday cheese board. Reed Collyer, owner of Collyer Catering, has been in the catering industry for over 30 years. Reed deeply believes in handcrafting nearly everything that leaves her kitchen. Whether the event is casual family barbecue or a benefit gala for 600 guests, Reed ensures that she works directly with each client. Before we begin, I would like to mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by the annual Friends of the Library campaign. We thank you for your support to make programs like this, as well as our collections available to the community. I hope everyone has a good time tonight. Here's Reed.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to cheese board making. You're not going to see my face for very long, thank goodness. We're going to spend a lot more time focusing on everything that is spread out on my table in front of me. I think the most important instruction to give you to get this process started is there is no wrong way to make a cheese board. We're just going to give you a couple of pro tips and some insight from our favorite local cheese shop, the Darien Cheese Shop in Darien in Goodwives Plaza, as well as some insight from a local farm in Colchester, Connecticut, as to what you should consider including. So let's get my face out of the way and start talking about cheese. So every good cheese board should start with a landing area or some fabulous plate or platter that you want to display all of your items on. The one that I've chosen, as you can see, is very well loved. There's a nice little burn mark in the center of it. But it is the top of a wine barrel, and I love the coloring on it, and I think that it displays the cheese really nicely. You can obviously also use something as small as one of these wonderful slate boards. If you've only got a couple of people that you're having over, you can use one of these lovely platters that you may have gotten as a gift along the way. Basically, there's no bad surface. You can even use a dinner plate if that's what you have available to you. I think tonight we're going to start with our types of cheeses and why we chose what we did. I partnered with the Darien Cheese Shop in order to make sure that we had a great assortment of flavors and textures. We also tried to choose all of the various milks. So goat milk, sheep, cow, so that you get, that variety and that different terroir based on where the cheeses are from. So we're going to start with one of my absolute favorites, which does not need any cutting and is absolutely magnificent. And hopefully this camera will do this justice. This is a Delicio de Bourgogne, which is a triple creme brie style cheese. I call it butter, basically. And because I would not recommend cutting this when you put it on a board, we're just gonna place it and then work around it. Delicio de Bourgogne is from Burgundy in France. It is from the brie family, as I mentioned. And this is a very good tribute to small scale industrial French cheese making. It has a white, bloomy, and piquant rind because of the type of bacteria that is used. The type of mold. It's called Penicillium candidum, if you really want to be educated and talk at your next cocktail party. But it gives a mushroomy aroma, and the thin rind adds a playful contrast to the rich, buttery, and tangy notes of the interior. So we've now placed a very nice white item on our cheese board to start. And I think we'll add something that has a little bit of yellow at this point. This is also from Darien Cheese. This is a Borin Cass, which is a Dutch, I'm not doing very well with my camera angles here, which is a Dutch Gouda style. You cannot see from this camera that this actually has a very, very orange color to it. One of the things that I often find when you're making a cheese board is that people select the cheeses they like and don't give any consideration to the color that's being added to the board. So we started with a white, we're now going to add an orange. This is also, if you can see as I'm cutting it, depending if we can get the camera angle, this is also a very hard cheese as opposed to the other one, which is literally like butter. There's no wrong way to cut cheese. I will tell you that I am not a big fan of putting large blocks of cheese on a board, especially if you have a large group of people. I think it's intimidating, and I feel that they don't necessarily want to manipulate or maneuver the cheese in order to enjoy it. So as you can see, I literally am finagling a little bit of geometry on this board, and we're just going to cut some cracker-sized pieces. You can go smaller or larger if that's how you prefer. And we're going to add them to our board so that we've got some more color. And again, this is a Dutch Gouda style. I'm going to turn this so that you can kind of see as we're going here, hopefully. All right, moving right along. Let's go to the Aso Arrifre, which is this beautiful cheese here. This is from France. It is a sheep raw milk cheese. It's actually from the Pyrenees region. Again, it is a hard cheese. It's an unpasteurized used milk cheese from the picturesque mountains of the Pyrenees that hold a fertilized grazing land. It unites two regions of France, the Aso Valley of Béarn and the Arrifre Forest of the Basque Country. It received an AOC protection in 1980, which requires that the cheese be produced with the milk of only two breeds of ewe. So this is a very controlled product, which to me would mean that it's going to be very consistent. So again, because this is a hard cheese and I don't want people to have to hack at it on the cheese board, I'm just going to cut some squares that we can add to our board. And then we'll keep going from there. You'll notice that I'm starting with the cheese on this board. You don't necessarily have to. You can start with the accoutrement if you are feeling that way. It doesn't always have to be done in the same order. I'm a little big on that piece, so we'll cut it down just a little bit. But you can also see that I'm choosing to pile. You have the option, of course, of making all of your cheese pieces exactly the same size and fanning them, which I'll show you, kind of like this, if that makes more sense. I don't know, again, if we can get a better camera shot of that. Maybe a little bit. Not sure there's enough contrast for you to be able to see that, but again, no rules. No rules when it comes to having delicious cheese. But again, this is another way that you could display the cheese if that was how you felt. So I think we'll switch gears for a minute and let's add some more color on here. I'm a big fan of using fresh and dried fruit on a cheese board. You can obviously leave the strawberries whole if you want to and kind of work them into the center like this. It's also kind of nice sometimes with the larger ones if you fan them just a little bit. As you can see, I just cut it a little bit and then I can kind of add that. It just adds a little bit more contrast, a little bit of different texture. Do that with this one too. Kind of add it here. Obviously this board's going to get a little crowded if you could see how much cheese was on my table right now. And then I think we will also add in, I have a bunch of different types of dried fruit here tonight. We have dried tart cherries from Michigan, which have kind of a darker red to them. I also did find a bag of craisins in my pantry. I'm sure lots of people have those types of things floating around. One of the things that I would say when you decide to make a cheese board like this, go through your house, see what you have that you think might add good tart flavors, sweet flavors, tangy flavors, and add those in. I also did find a small thing of dried plums. So we'll kind of add that maybe in between these couple cheeses over here. Just again, adding color and texture as we go. Our friends at Darien Cheese did supply us with an absolutely beautiful container of dried apricots. So we will include these, and they are heavenly, I can already tell. So here are some dried apricots to add kind of onto our board. There we go. So moving on, we're going to pull in another cheese. I think we'll actually move in the direction of the blue cheeses at this point. Not everybody loves a blue, but there is nothing more magnificent than a gorgeous Stilton at the holidays. And again, I apologize, my camera is not doing this justice. But the smell and the texture and the saltiness of this particular cheese is just outstanding. The one from Darien, let me give you their little notes on it quickly. This is from Colton, it's a Colton Bassett Stilton. It's from Nottinghamshire, England. It is firm yet creamy, sweet and tangy. So I don't think this one has as much of the salt that I am used to seeing in a blue or a Stilton. They recommend it with a tawny port or fresh pear. She did also comment that this is almost always seen on a holiday cheese plate. This one, because it's a little bit on the softer side, I'm not going to cut it. If you wanted to, you could crumble it up a little bit and just put a pile of the crumbles. You can even do that in front if you wanted to. I also decided to include from Cato Corner up in Colchester. This is their blue cheese. This is a black ledge blue, very different from a Stilton. This one has a fair amount of what I would call salt to it, almost caramelized, a caramelized finish. This one does tend to be quite crumbly, so I often will take it and kind of break it up a little bit like this, and then add it to the board just like that, so that when you add your serving pieces, people can just take little chunks of it if they are so inclined. If you've always been scared of trying a blue cheese besides the salad dressing on a salad bar, highly recommend that you try a good British Stilton before you give up. So accompaniments that go really nicely with the stronger blue cheeses are things like honey and honeycomb. Here we have, this is from France, and this actually is an acacia honey. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but the comb is present in here. So hopefully my assistant is going to grab me a spoon so that we can add some of this onto our board as well. Because it would be a really, really nice thing to put with the blues or the Stilton. We also have some absolutely magnificent orange slices in syrup. These also came from our friends at Darien Cheese, and we're going to add these momentarily, if we can get the jar open. There we go. Can you get me a little bowl for them too? While I'm kind of figuring out how to do these, I'm going to jump over quickly. I had a little bit of a baguette. It's actually a fichelle. It's a very skinny baguette in my freezer, and decided tonight just to make a couple toasts. These are not difficult to make. I literally sliced it, sprayed olive oil on the baking pan, drizzled olive oil over the breads, and then this one was seasoned with dried oregano and grated Parmesan. And this one was seasoned with smoked paprika. I'm a huge fan of smoked paprika. I think it just has a wonderful flavor to it. And I also liked the color contrast between the red and the green if you're doing a holiday cheese board. So we'll add that on at the end. All right, so we're coming back to our honeycomb. I did have this in the fridge, so it's a little cold right now, but hopefully we can slide it on out. Can you hear me, the tiny spoon, Chloe? Over there. And what I would recommend for this, obviously, is you want it to get pretty warm so that it can be easily drizzled over the cheese when people go to place it. This is a very deep bowl for this, but it's what we had available. So we're going to go with it. Hope that's okay with you guys. For the orange slices, I think we will do something similar. We're going to grab a little bit of the syrup in here and then try to get a few of these beauties out. This one I'm going to put with a tiny little tong. You could put it with a little fork if you wanted to, just something to make it as easy as possible for people to get out of that container. Again, everything on your cheese board should be as accessible as possible. So moving back to cheese, we are going to place one that does not need any type of cutting or manipulation. This is a Delicio de Poitou. It's an absolutely beautiful cheese with ash incorporated into the rind, if you can hopefully see a little bit of the gray. So we don't need to do anything to make that accessible. And I will tell you a little bit more about it. It's a raw goat's milk cheese from the Loire Valley of France. It is ash ripened. The Poitou Chèvre is a cooperative dairy located in the village of La Mothe-Saint-Héré in the Loire Valley of France. The dairy was established in 1897 when the herders in the village and its surrounding area banded together. It is sprinkled with salted vegetable ash, so that's where that gray contrast comes from, which gives the cheese a dark gray rind encasing a white paste. The flavor is citrusy and herbaceous, which is characteristic of a 2-month-old goat cheese. The texture is mouth-coating and luxurious. This one is best paired with champagne or a white wine with some citrus notes, such as a Sauvignon Blanc. I would say champagne would be the way to go for a holiday cheese board. I'm just noticing Pat's comment. Do we have a question, Pat, it looks like? I don't know if you want to pop in and tell me what it is.
Yes. How do we know which rinds to leave on versus which to take off?
You know, honestly, you can eat almost any rind. It's more a question of preference. And what?
Ingredients.
And ingredients. So if it's, sorry, my daughter who used to run the cheese department up in Vermont is also coaching as I'm speaking. So she said the ingredients also parlay into whether or not the rind should be eaten. Personally, I always try them. Some of them are better than others. But I will tell you, you can see this pile of rind that I've accumulated here. I have a tendency to put these in the freezer after I'm done making cheese boards. And they're really, really good to add to a pot of soup or to make stock. If you tend to make your own veggie stock or chicken stock, they just add a lot of richness and a lot of flavor to it as they break down. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
Great.
Was it?
And Reed, how many people would this cheese board feed?
Well, if you eat cheese like we do, probably 3. realistically, if you eat like a normal person, this is probably good for about 20 to 30 people. There is a lot of weight on this board by the time we're done with it. We got about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more cheeses still to add. So.
Okay, great.
So we'll keep moving.
Thank you.
So now that we've placed the goat, I think we'll go into another, what my children used to call stinky cheese. This is a Delicio. Also absolutely beautiful. I would not cut this when you put it on your board because it is quite soft. You can kind of hopefully see. This is a washed rind cheese. We may need to adjust this shot a little bit, Chloe. But I'll read you a little bit more. It's from Italy. It is a raw cow milk. And let's see what Ken had to say. Medium textured and earthy. That's basically the notes to it. Washed rind cheeses, I find, tend to be off-putting to a lot of people because the first thing that hits you is the smell of the rind. But if you can get past that and encourage your guests to try it, the cheese has some amazing depth to it that not a lot of other cheeses can offer. All right, we're going to keep going with the cow cheeses at this point. I mentioned earlier that we were going to bring in some cheeses from Cato Corner, which is up in Colchester. It is a family-owned dairy and cheese making operation. And they have, good grief, probably 20 different cheeses. At this point, they are all cow. So the first one that we have is a favorite of mine. This is actually called Womanchego. And hopefully all the girls in the audience, all the women in the audience appreciate that name. This is obviously a nutty, earthy cheese. It's a little bit on the firmer side, so we will cut it to place it on our board. But again, we're just trying to layer the flavors that we have available to make it as interesting as possible and to offer a little bit of something for everyone. When I do cheese boards for events, I do local cheeses, I do complicated, flavorful cheeses, and then I usually will add on a commercial goat cheese. I will also add on an aged cheddar. Cabot Creamery or the Irish brands are wonderful because I think it makes it accessible for everybody. You can also put Jarlsberg on if you are of the inclination to include it. I will say, if you get a goat cheese, it's really lovely to take that log and roll it in black pepper or a combination of black and red peppers. You could also do smoked paprika. Or you could even do it in fresh or dried herbs. So now we have added one of our Cato Corner, the Womanchego. Hopefully you guys can see that added on there. Okay. Next one, we're going back into the washed rind department. This is called, is this the Drunk Monk? Mm-hmm. Yes, this is the Drunk Monk. Sorry, I had to look back at my notes. This is a washed rind cheese. And again, you can't necessarily see the coloration on it, but it has a beautiful kind of peach color to it. And a little bit of texture from the way that it is processed and handled. This one, soft, not going to slice it for people, but I am going to put it into smaller wedges so that when people go to put it on their cracker or their bread, it's a little bit more accessible. And that way we can also place this in a couple different locations just to keep it interesting. I wish you all could smell how pungent that is right now. It's really just yummy, yummy stuff. Moving on, this is an aged Bloomsday, again from Cato Corner, another firm cheese. It's nutty, sharp, balanced, and distinctive. It's a classic, they call it a classic aged cheese. You can see on this one, I am going to take the rind off, whoever it was that asked that question. This rind is quite thick and very, let me bring it over this way, and very hard. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend eating that one. This one would be really good though to keep in your freezer to add to a pot of soup. So let's get some of this on. It's also a really good idea to have a decently sharp knife when you do this. Should always have a decently sharp knife when you're doing anything in the kitchen. Oop, because you don't want to cut your thumb off. This one I'm going to go a little bit smaller with the size of the cuts I'm making, and I think we'll add it next to these beautiful oranges that we have.
And Reed,
yes.
Jeff is asking, how long before it is served would you make a cheese board?
I would probably make, first of all, I've had this cheese out for over an hour at this point. I think a lot of us make the mistake of eating cheese too cold, and it does not allow all of the different layers of the flavor to come up. So generally speaking, I would make the cheese board an hour to an hour and a half ahead, and then try to keep it someplace cool. You know, stick it out in your garage if you need to, and then bring it in about 30 minutes before you serve it. I often say Americans drink their red wine too warm and their white wine too cold. And I would say that we probably eat cheese at the wrong temperature most of the time too. All right, so you can see I'm going a little bit heavier with this one. This, just in terms of the quantity I'm including, this is a really, oops, I'm not in the camera, sorry guys. This is a really, really lovely cheese, and a lot of people who go for the milder flavors tend to enjoy this one. So we'll include a little extra. Okay. My piles are falling over, my little mountains of cheese here. All right, so the last cheese that we're going to work in is an aged Bloomsday. No, I'm sorry, this is the Cornerstone. This is kind of an exciting product for Cato Corner. I've actually not sampled this one, so I can't tell you much about it on a personal level. I'm really bad with camera angles, guys. This is their first native cultured cheese. It's made in collaboration with Parish Hill Creamery in Vermont and Birch Run Hills Farm in Pennsylvania. Cornerstone is an exploration of American terroir. Each of the 3 cheesemakers follows the same recipe to grow our own starter cultures and make a tome style cheese. He said the character of the cheeses varies from batch to batch, but it has a toothsome, supple texture with hints of yogurt and apple. So have to try that one when we're done with class here. Any other questions, Pat, that I can answer while we're doing this?
No, one person's asking, how much do you put on your plate, I guess, in going up to a cheese board?
Oh, if it's me, too much.
Yeah.
Can you tell I am quite the cheese hog here? You know, honestly, I'm a big fan when you're doing a party in particular of doing the smallest plate you can get your hands on. Because I feel like people have a tendency to talk when they're socializing. They will make a plate, put the plate down because they get involved in a conversation or they go to get a drink, and then the plate goes to waste. So I feel that no bigger than I can't even show this, a 6-inch plate, it's called a bread and butter plate, is really the ideal to have as an appetizer side plate, if that makes sense. And again, if you keep your hardware, I'm not thinking of the right word right now, on the smaller side as well, your silverware, your hardware. My daughter's laughing at me. So these are very tiny tongs. They're actually a sugar tong, which are really easy to find, you know, at a local store, or I'm sure online if you don't want to go anywhere. Thrift stores are also really, really great for this type of stuff. And you can find some amazing vintage stuff that adds like a whole other element to your cheese board. But again, because it's a smaller tong, people aren't going to take a ton when they come up. I do also have a cutting knife here, which will, I think we'll put this one in the Delicio. Hopefully Chloe can get a shot of that for you. And then we're just going to start adding additional layers to our board here. Now that we've placed most of our cheeses, and we may make some adjustments and add some additions as we go. Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting.
No, not at all.
Jeff is asking, how do you alert your guests as to what it is they're eating?
Very good question. I meant to send you, Pat, there's a bunch of different websites where you can get these absolutely adorable little cheese place cards. You can get disposable. You can also get reusable. They come in the shape of the various animals, which is really, really wonderful. So you can find ones that are cow, and then you can write the name of the cheese, which is very helpful because there are people that are intolerant to cow milk, but can have sheep and goat. So the more, you know, the more instruction you can give people, the better. You can also make them really easily if you have access to a printer, and then just put them on a toothpick.
Perfect.
Or index card. Chloe's whispering. An index card also works very well.
And Celia is asking, do you recommend particular cheeses or breads with different cheese, particular crackers or breads with the different cheeses?
You know, you can make all the recommendations you want in the world, but when you put together a board for a party, people are going to do what they want when they come up to it. So I think it's always a good idea to have a mix of heartier style crackers that can handle the heavier cheeses that need to be spread. And then also have some of the lighter style crackers. I'll show you guys as we get into this. This is a new brand that I recently discovered. They're Rutherford and Meyer, and they're almost like a Bremner wafer, if you guys are familiar with that. These are very light, but they have a lot of flavor to them. Let me show you how thin they are, hopefully. So they're a very, very light cracker. They don't have a lot of heft. So we're definitely going to include some of these to go with the cheeses that we've already cut. And definitely with the Delicio de Bourgogne that's up here, because it is such a gentle cheese and very soft. We also, as I mentioned earlier, have the baguette that we went ahead and made because we toasted these. Oops, I'll come back into the shot. Because we toasted these in the oven, they're quite rigid and would be resilient for some of the heavier cheeses. So we'll work some of those in now too. Unfortunately, some of my favorite crackers, which are like the Rainforest Crisps, I did not have and I could not get quickly enough for our class. But I do love them because they have that lovely dark color, and they also have the fruit and nut tanginess already built in, which is a really nice accompaniment to some of these cheeses. So we're going super organic with this and just kind of placing things where we think they work the best. Do we have another question, Pat? It looks like.
Let's see. Oh, it's Monica's asking, do you recommend flavored crackers or plain crackers?
I would say both, absolutely. The Rutherford and Meyer that I just put are garlic and olive oil wafer. So again, with a milder cheese, they're going to add a little bit of interest. But there are a lot of diehards who would prefer an unflavored, very basic cracker, especially when they're having some of the stronger cheeses, so that you get as much of that flavor as possible. We have cheese straws. And we literally just put them in one of our household drinking glasses because it was just an easy way to contain them. But it's a way of adding, Chloe will show you, it's a way of adding a little bit of height to the board as well. Hopefully you can get that. You guys are getting the whole shot of my dining room table here. And then we also have two different types of nuts. We have some really, really yummy mixed nuts that came to us from Darien cheese. And then I also made some cracked pepper cashews, which are one of, I'm trying to get you a detail shot, which are one of my favorite things to have out on a bar at this time of year. They're quite spicy and just a fun thing to have. Can you get me a couple more little spoons if we have them? Again, these days, I wish I had smaller bowls for these because they would work better on the board. But these days, I don't ever recommend putting anything out without a utensil. People didn't really like to touch food before COVID, and now they really don't like to touch food. So it's a good idea to make everything, match everything with its own utensil so that people are comfortable. Perfect. All right, so we have.
Reed,
yes.
Rachel's asking, is there an easy way to isolate nuts on a cheese board for those who may be allergic?
In a bowl. Absolutely, in a bowl. And if you're really concerned about it, because again, as cheese boards are enjoyed, things tend to get a little messier. So if you're very concerned about a stray nut winding up in a pile of cheese, then I would recommend putting them in bowls outside the cheese board. So in other words, we could take these, larger glass bowls that we have and kind of place them on the outside of the board. I don't know if we can show you this. Again, if they were a match size, it would be helpful, but with their own spoon so that, again, if someone is coming to grab it, they can. I'm also a huge fan of ramekins when you're doing a cheese board because they're a nice contained size. You can see that's what we put some of the oranges in. So that would be my workaround for that.
And Reed, one of your viewers is asking, how do you eat cheese to enjoy it the most?
In large quantities, would that be a fair answer? I tend to actually like it straight. I don't always put it on a cracker or a piece of bread. It's kind of fun to play with how different the flavor of the cheese is if you have it alone or if you add something else to it. Oh, she put me on camera again. So, I tend to like it straight, if that makes any sense. It's a little bit more difficult to do with some of the runny cheeses, but I always recommend trying them straight first.
Great.
Reed, do you have any unique pairings that you'd recommend? Something that, certain people might not even think of.
Oh, certain people might not even think of. Hopefully all of you know about quince jam. Actually, can you grab the one that we have? I'm going to shout out another of our coworkers, Amanda, if that's okay, because Tina Bothy, who works in Darien, made quince jam, the quince marmalade last year. It's in the fridge. So a lot of people, especially if you are fans of the restaurant Barcelona, you're familiar with membrillo, which is quince paste. It's usually served in slices and it has a really, really lovely tang to it that goes nicely with a lot of cheese. Quince marmalade is a very different flavor and a different texture. And we actually were enjoying this the other night. What cheese did we have it with the other night?
Womanchego.
Oh yeah, we had it with the Womanchego and the blue cheese. So I don't know. Oh, we need to switch. Oh, sorry. I don't know how to do cameras. So hopefully you can see that. All right, now we'll swing back over here.
Oh, it looks
A little
really
bit,
good.
yeah, it's really divine. And actually the tanginess that I am used to seeing in Membrillo is much subtler in this. This is a little bit, well, it's significantly sweeter, which is why it was really nice with the blue cheese. I also love fig jam with almost any cheese that is out there.
Yeah. Reed,
Yes.
Lisa is asking, would you mix olives with the fruits on a cheese board or use olives separately with an only olive and cheese board?
So I'm sorry, are you asking like, would I place them together or would I include them all together?
I think she's asking if they'd be included.
Oh, absolutely. We actually have really beautiful olives here, which I haven't even had a chance to put on yet. Oop, coming up. They are a beautiful green color. So maybe Chloe can find me another bowl that we can incorporate those into. These are a Castelvetrano olive. Oh, let's come this way. We're going to switch. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see anything at this point. So, but they're absolutely gorgeous green color. And they have a little bit of heft to them, like a fairly good size. So we're going to find a container to put some of those in because then we'll get some green on our board. Other elements that we brought to include, and again, I like to think that a lot of people have stuff laying around their house that they can just add on kind of as they're building their board. It should be fun. It shouldn't be stressful. I have a whole bunch of fresh thyme here, which we thought would be kind of fun to include, just to add a little bit more visual interest. Obviously, it's also going to impart a little bit of flavor into the cheeses the longer it sits with them. So we'll do that, and we'll help divide things a little bit as well. But you could do fresh basil, you could do fresh tarragon, oregano, whatever you may have at home. Yep, that'll work. We found a bowl. So we're going to put, yes.
Oh, Jeff is asking, how long before the sit-down meal do you serve the cheese board?
So Jeff, are you thinking of having it as an aperitif before a dinner?
He can't, I don't think he can talk.
Okay.
Oh wait, let's see if he answers. Oh yes, he is. That's exactly right. Yes.
Yes. So I don't like to rush dinners that, you know, I don't like to rush eating at all, to be perfectly honest. So I would say if this is going to be what you're doing for your cocktail hour or your appetizer, I would probably, if guests are invited for 6 o'clock, let them get a cocktail. I would do cheese starting at 6:15, 6:30, and then not plan to sit down for dinner until 7:30 at the earliest. I feel that dining should be leisurely, and especially at this time of year, you should enjoy every part of it. If that makes sense.
Well, we're on our way over now.
Well, good, because there's a lot of cheese here. So you can see we added in the olives so that we could get a little bit more green on the board. And, you know, honestly, I would probably at this point go back and add a little bit more cheese over here just to kind of bump it up a little bit. And also over here, if I had flowers, I would work flowers in at this point just to kind of fill in some of the gaps. You can also obviously on a cheese board do things like vegetables. If you have, you know, beautiful heirloom or grape tomatoes sitting around, those are a great way to add visual interest. I don't usually do things like broccoli on a cheese board unless I'm including crudité with it, just because you really need to blanch it before you put it on. I was just going to put my face back on. Sorry, people, you got me, not the cheese. I'm back. So again, I think the most important thing, as I said at the beginning of this, is there's no wrong way to do it. If you only like Jarlsberg and cheddar and Munster and Gouda, then that's what should go on your board. Absolutely. But don't be afraid to use the resources that are local to us, and, you know, go into Darien Cheese and talk to Ken and Tori and Caitlin and say, I'm really not experimental, but these are the things I know I like. And they can make you suggestions of things that are wonderful and maybe a little bit outside your comfort zone. And again, just to recap, I think that the harder cheeses should be cut, just to make it easier for people who are, you know, holding a cocktail and trying to make a little plate. Or even if I'm just picking up one piece and putting it on a cracker and going on my way, I think it's easier if I don't have to handle a knife and cut things as I'm enjoying the social part of an event. And color, don't forget color, it's important.
Does anybody have any other questions? Oh,
There's a few.
Joanne is asking, is it hard to acquire a cheese board like the one you're using this evening?
This literally came from Home Goods, literally. I obviously am looking for trays and platters all the time. So sometimes I get lucky and stumble upon something. But I have also in the past used granite tiles from Home Depot. So if you knew that you were having 6 friends over, and in the age of COVID, you wanted to make 6 individual cheese boards so that everybody had their own, you could go to Home Depot and pick up a box of tiles. They're not expensive. The other thing about the granite tiles is if you chill them, they stay cold, which is lovely. Slate also does that. But you can do any type of wood plank that at least has some type of a surface on it that's food safe. Or you could also just, you know, choose some beautiful dinner plates that you have and do small cheese boards that way.
Okay.
And actually, going back to the question, I can't remember who it was that asked it about how you let people know what's on a board. That's another way that yeah, it's another way you can do it with a small group. Again, I'm looking at this as, you know, having a cocktail party for 25 or 30 people. But if you know you're having 10 guests, which is what we're currently allowed to have at our houses, you could do a small plate that had all the sheep milk that you had chosen, and a small plate that had all the goat. And that would be a really nice way to kind of differentiate it. You could also go by country. There's all sorts of different ways to make it really interesting and inviting, and have some fun with it too.
Good. And one last question, any ideas for cheese board leftovers from Rachel?
Leftovers? What's a leftover, Rachel?
Clearly she hasn't met the Darien library staff.
We have another question as well too when you're done.
Okay, so I tend to keep there's a couple different things. If you have cheese papers, those are the best things to wrap leftover cheese in, because that's what it's meant for. Otherwise, I have a tendency to keep my cheese in glass containers. But obviously, if you put softer cheeses with harder cheeses, you're mixing the molds and the bacteria, which Chloe is going like this in the background. So you want to try to keep stuff as separate as possible, which is why the papers are ideal. Wax sandwich bags I have used in a pinch so that I can put each individual cheese in its own container and then put them in the fridge that way.
Okay.
But obviously the softer cheeses consume, you know, more quickly.
Right. And Nancy's asking, have you ever used edible flowers?
Oh yes, I love edible flowers. They're one of my favorite things. If I could have justified a large order with my wholesale distributor, you would have seen edible pansies because they're absolutely spectacular at this time of year. But just seemed a little too much, so we didn't do that.
All right. Reed, this has been wonderful, and I'm just sorry that we can't all run out and plan a big event to practice these ideas, but maybe people will use them for their families.
Yes, absolutely. And again, like we said, Darien cheese, if you went in and said, okay, it's only 5 of us home for Christmas Eve, what can we do that would be magnificent? He will absolutely, you know, make you some good suggestions for how to make it something special this year.
If people want to pick out wines to serve with their cheeses,
yes,
they can certainly, if you go to David at Sipster's and
yes,
tell him what it is you're serving, he has great suggestions. So
yes. And I know David and Ken know each other quite well, so they have a good, strong partnership in making things wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Happy
Rime.
holidays, everybody.
Happy
Thank you,
holidays
Chloe.
to you.
Thank you.
Bye now.